Chapter 1. The Laugh Before the Storm. The twin suns of Zephyr Prime hung low in the bruised purple sky, casting long, jagged shadows over the shattered remnants of what had once been a thriving cityscape. Now, it was nothing but broken towers, scorched earth, and silent monuments to a war that had dragged on for generations. The air was thick with the acrid scent of ionized metal and burning fuel, an invisible reminder of the countless skirmishes and massive battles that had carved scars into this forsaken world. Hovercraft and war machines lay scattered, some still smoldering, others inert and forgotten like tombstones for fallen soldiers. Above it all, the deep hum of energy shields flickered intermittently, the invisible armor guarding the last vestiges of resistance. Yet amid this chaos, one figure stood out on a ridge overlooking the devastated battlefield, calm and unyielding as a mountain peak. Captain Alara Voss, known across multiple star systems by her call sign Ghostfire, stared out through the visor of her combat suit, the heads-up display flickering with incoming data. The suit's advanced neural interface linked directly to her mind, streaming tactical analytics, enemy positions, and environmental variables into a seamless overlay of information that few humans had mastered with such precision. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly, strands catching the faint wind that swept over the broken landscape like whispered warnings. Her eyes, sharp, clear, burning with quiet fire, scanned every movement below, every flicker of sensor data, every blip on the tactical grid. This was not merely another mission. This was the moment that would define her entire career, a crucible that would test every skill she had honed through years of grueling training and unforgiving combat. The war, brutal and endless, had been fought across countless star systems between the coalition of free worlds and the Zarnathi Dominion, a ruthless alien empire that had carved its name into galactic history through fear and annihilation. The Dominion's armies were legendary, towering bioengineered soldiers with chitinous armor, dreadnought-class warships bristling with plasma turrets, and fleets that moved like shadows through the void. And at the heart of their military might stood General Thrax, a towering figure with four sinewy arms, his mottled green skin scarred by countless battles, and eyes that burned with a cold, merciless intelligence. Thrax was the living embodiment of Dominion supremacy, undefeated in over 2 decades of single combat engagements, his call sign whispered in fear and reverence across every allied channel. The comm crackled sharply, and Alara's call sign was broadcast across the war grid, slicing through the static like a dagger. Ghostfire. The voice sneered, unmistakably that of General Thrax himself. The deep baritone was laced with derision, carrying an alien amusement that echoed in every corner of the battlefield. Ghostfire? What a joke. A ghost that burns? Tell me, Captain, how does a fairy tale hope to stand against the wrath of a Dominion general? The words rippled across the comm, and a wave of tension surged through the ranks of the coalition. Many of her allies flinched at the taunt, their hands tightening around weapon grips, while others exchanged uneasy glances. The Dominion forces, too, radiated confidence, their war machines and soldiers bristling with lethal readiness. Thrax's laughter was a weapon, sharp and cutting, intended to shatter morale before the first shot was fired. But Alara stood unmoved, her breath steady, her mind honed like the edge of a blade. The taunt, instead of shaking her, ignited a quiet fire deep within her soul. She knew what she was up against, the legacy of an alien general whose shadow stretched across 2 decades of war, whose tactics had crushed entire fleets, whose reputation was a fortress seemingly impregnable. Yet, in that moment, she felt a surge of something far more powerful than fear or doubt. She felt the unyielding resolve of humanity, a spirit tempered by hardship, creativity, and an indomitable will to survive and triumph. This was her moment to shatter myths, to rewrite history, to prove that beneath the frail veneer of a human soldier burned a fire fierce enough to challenge even the mightiest of alien warlords. Behind her, the bridge of the Phantom's vengeance was a hive of activity. The sleek battle cruiser, a marvel of human engineering, gleamed faintly against the dying light, its hull etched with scars and victory marks from countless missions. Engineers and tactical officers moved with precise urgency, feeding data into the ship's core processors, running simulations of enemy formations, and calibrating weapons systems to optimal efficiency. Alara's second-in-command, Lieutenant Eric Hahn, caught her eye and gave a subtle nod, a silent gesture of trust and readiness. "Captain, all systems are green. Tactical scans show a breach in the Dominion's forward lines. Their shield matrix is faltering. This might be our opening," Eric reported, his voice steady but tinged with excitement. Alara didn't reply immediately. Instead, she closed her eyes briefly, centering herself in the storm of war raging around her. Years of training had taught her that victory was never a matter of brute force alone. It was the precise calculation of timing, the mastery of strategy, the ability to read the enemy's moves and strike with lethal precision. She recalled the lessons from her mentors, the countless drills in zero-gravity simulators, and the battles where every second could mean life or death. The record held by Thrax for the fastest single-combat victory, a brutal mission completed in under 45 minutes, was a monument she intended to dismantle, piece by piece. The comm buzzed again, this time a steady pulse of encrypted messages from Allied fleets converging on the battlefield. The Coalition's forces were outnumbered but not outmatched, relying on human ingenuity and unexpected tactics to even the scales against the Dominion's overwhelming power. Alara tapped her wrist console, activating the ship's cloaking field, a cutting-edge technology that rendered the Phantom's vengeance nearly invisible to enemy sensors. The hum of the cloaking device was barely perceptible, a ghostly whisper against the cacophony of war. "Ghost fire to all units." Alara's voice rang out across encrypted channels, calm yet commanding. "Engage on my mark. Stick to the plan. Disrupt, confuse, and strike where they least expect. We don't just fight for survival. We fight to rewrite the course of this war. Let's show them what humanity can do." Her words ignited a spark of hope and determination across the Coalition fleets. The Phantom's vengeance slipped silently through the fractured skyline, weaving between the skeletal remains of shattered buildings and craters scorched by plasma fire. Below, Dominion patrols moved with mechanical precision, their senses sharp but unprepared for the silent shadow that was closing in. Minutes later, as the first salvo of energy blasts tore through the Dominion's lines, General Thrax's voice returned over the comm, no longer mocking, but sharp with disbelief and fury. "Impossible. Who is this ghost fire who dares to breach my defenses?" Alara smiled grimly behind her visor. The laughter that had greeted her call sign moments before was now replaced by a storm of battle cries, desperate orders, and the thunderous roar of war machines clashing in a brutal dance of destruction. And amid the chaos, the seeds of a new legend were being sown, a legend that would shake the foundations of the Dominion, shatter a 2-decade-old record, and immortalize a human captain who refused to be anything less than a blazing force of nature. For Alara Voss, the battle had only just begun, but already, the galaxy was starting to remember her name, Ghostfire, the ghost that burns brighter than any star. The next hours that unfolded over Zephyr Prime were unlike anything the Coalition or the Dominion had witnessed in recent memory. The Phantom's vengeance darted through the ruins like a vengeful wraith, cloaked in shadows, yet scorching the enemy with precise strikes of plasma and kinetic missiles that tore through the alien armor like paper. Each move Alara made was a masterstroke of tactical genius. Every decision a calculated gamble that paid off with ruthless efficiency. Her squadron, a hand-picked fleet of the fastest, most agile ships, mimicked her movements with disciplined precision, spreading chaos in the Dominion's ranks and severing their communications with surgical accuracy. General Thrax, famed for his ruthless command and brutal strategies, found himself blindsided by this human captain whose unpredictability defied every expectation. His orders grew frantic, his voice sharp as he barked commands to his lieutenants, attempting to recalibrate defenses and redirect his forces to counter the sudden onslaught. But every plan was anticipated, every trap evaded with a grace that seemed almost supernatural. To the Dominion soldiers, it was as if a flame danced beyond their reach, elusive yet devastating. Behind the scenes, Alara's mind raced through data streams pouring into her neural interface, analyzing patterns, predicting movements, adapting strategies in real time. She was more than a pilot. She was a symphony conductor orchestrating a ballet of destruction that defied conventional war doctrines. The weight of history pressed down on her shoulders. Every soldier who had fallen in the decades-long war, every world devastated by Dominion conquest, every voice that had doubted humanity's strength was a silent witness to her resolve. Yet despite the ferocity of battle, a strange calm persisted within her, a centered focus that few understood. She felt the pulse of the ship beneath her, the hum of energy flowing through the circuits, the subtle vibrations of the hull as it sliced through atmosphere and debris. The suit's neural link heightened her senses, allowing her to feel the tiniest shifts in enemy energy signatures, to anticipate attacks before they materialized. Her hands moved with practiced precision, each adjustment to the ship's thrusters and weapon systems a dance of reflex and calculation. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Eric Hahn, was a constant presence at her side, his voice a steadying anchor amidst the storm. "Captain, shields at 70%. Incoming heavy plasma from the North Cluster. Recommend evasive maneuvers and counterfire." Alara nodded, executing a sharp roll that sent the enemy blasts whistling past the Phantom's Vengeance, their power dissipated harmlessly against the reinforced hull. With a quick sequence of commands, she launched a volley of guided missiles that homed in on the enemy battery, reducing it to molten slag. The battle raged across the valley, a maelstrom of fire and metal. Ground troops of the Dominion, towering bio-soldiers with armor that shimmered like living crystal, engaged coalition forces in brutal hand-to-hand combat below, but it was the aerial and orbital conflict that would decide the day. The Dominion's dreadnoughts roared into action, unleashing barges of energy that threatened to overwhelm the coalition fleet. But Alara's leadership was the fulcrum that kept hope alive. Her ability to exploit the smallest weaknesses, to turn enemy strengths into liabilities, was unparalleled. Minutes turned into an hour, and as the sun dipped behind the jagged horizon, casting the battlefield in an eerie twilight, the tides of battle shifted unmistakably. The Dominion lines, once a seemingly impenetrable fortress, were now fractured, their forces retreating under the relentless pressure of human ingenuity and unyielding will. Through it all, the comm channels buzzed with chatter, the alien general's earlier laughter replaced by terse, clipped orders and uneasy silence. Alara allowed herself a brief moment to breathe, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins, the weight of exhaustion tempered by exhilaration. She looked out from the bridge viewport at the battered landscape below, the ruins now stained with the blood of two armies, but also lit by the flickering fires of victory. She had done the impossible, broken through the Dominion's defenses, shattered the myth of their invincibility, and bested a general whose name had been synonymous with fear for over 20 years. And yet, she knew this was only the beginning. The war was far from over, and Thrax would not relinquish his record, or his pride, so easily. But tonight, in this broken world beneath fading suns, a human captain had carved her name into legend, and the galaxy would never forget the moment when Ghostfire burned brighter than any star. The aftermath of the first major strike echoed through the void like a shattering thunderclap, but Captain Alara Voss remained resolutely focused, her mind a fortress of discipline amid the chaos. The Phantom's Vengeance drifted through the smoke-stained skies of Zephyr Prime, its sleek frame cutting a path between falling debris and still-active turrets firing blindly into the darkening air. Alara's neural interface flickered softly in her helmet, feeding her a continuous stream of data, enemy positions, shield fluctuations, ammunition levels, and vital signs from her squadron. Despite the overwhelming odds, despite the alien general's sneering dismissal of her existence mere moments ago, Alara felt a quiet certainty blooming within her. She was not just a soldier here. She was a force of nature, an ember that had caught flame, destined to engulf the darkness. Every movement she made was choreographed precision, honed through years of relentless training and hardened by the unforgiving fires of countless battles. Her fingers danced across the control panel, commanding her ship to pivot with lethal grace, dodging volleys of plasma bolts and returning fire with pinpoint accuracy. Her breath was calm, measured, a stark contrast to the pounding rhythm of her heart that echoed like a war drum beneath her ribcage. Around her, The bridge hummed with tension and resolve, her crew's eyes locked on their displays, their hands steady despite the destruction tearing at the world below. The Dominion's response was swift and brutal. War machines, bioengineered monstrosities towering nearly twice her own height, lumbered into the fray with metallic limbs whirring and weapons charging. Their alien eyes glowed with a fierce, primal intelligence as they sought out the source of the human incursion. General Thrax, no longer cloaked in mockery, was now a storm of wrathful command, his voice barking orders that rippled through his forces with terrifying effect. The ground shook as his elite battalions surged forward, their advance relentless and calculated, but Alara was always a step ahead. Using the Phantom's Vengeance's advanced cloaking and electronic warfare systems, she slipped through enemy lines, cutting comms and disabling sensors, turning the Dominion's overwhelming numbers into a blind, stumbling force. A sudden flash of movement on her HUD caught her eye, an enemy dreadnought deploying its main cannon, a gargantuan weapon designed to vaporize entire city blocks. Alara's muscles tensed. Time slowed in her perception as she executed a rapid series of maneuvers, skimming close over ruined rooftops, weaving between falling rubble. With a final burst of thruster power, she launched a barrage of homing missiles directly into the cannon's exposed energy conduits. The explosion was instantaneous, a brilliant bloom of light and heat that tore through the dreadnought's hull, sending shockwaves that rattled the battlefield. Cheers erupted from her crew, but Alara's focus remained unbroken. This was a victory, yes, but only one of many needed to topple the Dominion's grip. Back on the Dominion side, General Thrax's patience wore thin. His eyes, sharp and calculating, now burned with fierce determination. Ghostfire, he hissed through gritted teeth over the comm channel. You are a spark that threatens to ignite a wildfire. You may have breached my defenses, but the war is far from over. Prepare to be extinguished. The tone was not one of laughter now, but a cold promise of retribution. The call sign that had been a source of amusement moments before was now a whispered curse among Dominion troops. For the first time in 2 decades, the name Thrax feared was not one of his own. It belonged to a human. Despite the mounting pressure, Alara refused to falter. She recalled the faces of her fallen comrades, the countless sacrifices made by soldiers across the coalition, and the countless planets that still bore the scars of Dominion tyranny. Every second counted. Every decision was a step towards a future where humanity was no longer the hunted but the hunter. She adjusted her course, signaling to her wingmen to spread out, to flank and disorient the enemy forces. Her mind was a tempest of strategy, improvisation, and raw willpower. The battle crescendoed in a blur of light and sound. Explosions illuminated the smoky skies. Energy beams cut through the haze like shards of lightning, and the cries of combatants echoed beneath the canopy of destruction. Yet through it all, Alara was the eye of the storm. Her presence was an unstoppable blaze cutting through the Dominion's defenses, each successful strike sending ripples of hope through her allies and waves of dread through her enemies. Minutes stretched, each one laden with peril and promise. And then, almost without warning, the tide turned irrevocably. The Dominion's once formidable shield grid faltered, fractured by a relentless barrage of coordinated strikes and daring maneuvers led by Alara herself. The enemy lines broke, their soldiers faltered, and the massive war machines began to retreat under the pressure of the unexpected human fury. On the comm channel, the alien general's voice cracked with disbelief, unable to comprehend the audacity and skill of a human captain who had shattered a 20-year record of dominance. Alara stood on the precipice of legend. The record of the fastest, most decisive victory in single combat missions, a milestone held sacred by the Dominion, was about to be rewritten by a human. The galaxy held its breath, watching as Ghostfire soared through the shattered skies, a blazing comet marking the dawn of a new era. The final moments of the battle hung heavy in the smoky air like the last embers of a dying fire. Yet for Captain Alara Voss, the flames within her soul roared brighter than ever. Every second was a razor's edge, every decision a gamble that could mean the difference between triumph and oblivion. As the Dominion's forces reeled from the sudden, overwhelming assault, Alara pressed forward with unrelenting determination. Her ship, The Phantom's vengeance danced through the air, slipping past the faltering shield barriers like a phantom indeed, its weapon systems tearing through enemy turrets and crippling their supply lines. The battlefield below was a tempest of destruction, a whirlwind of explosions and cascading energy discharges that echoed through the shattered remains of Zephyr Prime's once mighty cities. Her neural link flooded her consciousness with streams of data vital signs of her squadron, weapon cooldown cycles, incoming enemy vectors, and an endless cascade of tactical simulations running in real time. She was no longer just a pilot. She was a conductor orchestrating a symphony of destruction against an empire that had for too long believed itself untouchable. The memories of every fallen comrade, every moment spent training in the harshest simulators, every scar she bore, both physical and mental, fused together in a fiery resolve that hardened her spirit. The laughter of General Thrax, once mocking and dismissive, now lay shattered under the weight of her relentless assault. She could feel the tide turning not just in this battle, but across the entire war. Yet even as victory approached, Alera's mind was sharp and vigilant. She knew better than anyone that triumph in war was never guaranteed. Every broken enemy line risked a counterstrike. Every suppressed turret could erupt again with deadly fury. Her fingers flew over the controls, guiding the Phantom's vengeance into an intricate series of maneuvers, each calculated to draw out enemy forces, create openings, and cripple their capacity to retaliate. The roar of plasma cannons and the flash of missile salvos became a rhythmic pulse, a dance of death that Alera led with unparalleled mastery. Minutes later, as the Dominion's final bastions crumbled and their war machines limped away, a calm settled over the battlefield, an eerie silence punctuated only by distant explosions and the crackling of failing energy shields. Alera lowered her visor, sweat glistening beneath, her breath steady but heavy with the weight of what had just been accomplished. Her ship's AI reported system integrity intact, ammunition reserves sufficient, and squadron status overwhelmingly positive. Against all odds, she had broken through, shattered the legend of the Zarnathi general, and etched her name into the annals of galactic history. Across the comm channel, an unusual silence followed. The usual taunts, the haughty commands, even the mechanical orders were absent. Then, almost imperceptibly, a voice pierced through the voice of General Thrax, heavy with grudging respect and disbelief. Ghostfire, your fire burns too brightly for any ghost. Today, you have rewritten history. Chapter 2, Flames of a New Dawn. The victory on Zephyr Prime was more than a battle won. It was a signal flare igniting hope across the coalition of free worlds. Word of Captain Alera Voss's unprecedented triumph spread swiftly through interstellar channels, stirring a wave of inspiration in the hearts of soldiers and civilians alike. Yet for Alera, the moment of glory was fleeting. War was a relentless tide, and the embers of today's victory needed to be fanned into a flame capable of toppling empires. In the sleek command hub aboard the Coalition flagship Aegis Resolute, Alera stood before the assembled council of military strategists, political leaders, and veteran commanders. The room buzzed with tension and anticipation, the atmosphere thick with the weight of decisions that would shape the future of countless star systems. Holographic displays shimmered with star maps, enemy fleet movements, and logistics data, illuminating the faces of those who bore the burden of leadership. Alera's voice, calm yet imbued with the fierce conviction born of battlefield experience, cut through the room. Our victory at Zephyr Prime proves that the Dominion's grip is not unbreakable. We have found weaknesses, cracks in their armor we can exploit. But this war will not end with one battle. We must strike swiftly, decisively, and with unity. The council murmured their agreement, eyes fixed on the young captain who had challenged centuries of Dominion dominance. Plans were laid bare, coordinated strikes on supply lines, accelerated training for human pilots infused with Alera's combat techniques, and diplomatic overtures to once neutral star systems now eager to join the cause. Yet amidst the strategies and charts, Alera felt the gnawing burden of responsibility. The Dominion would retaliate fiercely. Their wounded pride would fuel campaigns of vengeance. The shadow of General Thrax loomed large, a reminder that her greatest challenge still lay ahead. As the meeting adjourned, Alara retreated to a quieter chamber, her mind restless despite the brief respite. She gazed out at the stars, distant suns shimmering cold and indifferent. The weight of her legacy pressed on her shoulders, but so too did a fierce determination to honor every sacrifice made in this war. With her hand resting on the worn insignia of her command jacket, she vowed silently to push beyond limits, to ignite a flame so powerful it would light the path to freedom for all humanity. The war had just begun, but Captain Ghostfire was ready to burn brighter than ever. The days following the victory at Zephyr Prime were a whirlwind of preparation and reflection. Captain Alara Voss found herself thrust from the chaos of battle into the equally daunting realm of leadership and diplomacy. The coalition of free worlds, a fragile alliance of disparate planets and factions, looked to her not just as a war hero, but as a symbol of hope against the oppressive shadow of the Dominion. Yet Alara knew that symbols alone would not win wars. It would be the relentless grind of strategy, sacrifice, and unyielding resolve that would decide the fate of billions. Within the sprawling command center of the Aegis Resolute, Alara spent endless hours poring over tactical data, collaborating with seasoned commanders and intelligence officers who had long waged guerrilla campaigns against Dominion forces. The room was a stark contrast to the battlefield, a theater of screens and holograms, where the weapons were information and the battles fought in calculated moves on star charts. Yet the stakes were just as high, each decision a thread in the fragile tapestry of survival. Alara's mind was ceaselessly active, processing the staggering complexity of interstellar warfare. The Dominion, despite their recent setback, remained a monolith of power, their fleets vast, and their resources seemingly endless. But the victory at Zephyr Prime had cracked the illusion of invincibility. For the first time in decades, the coalition had a blueprint for success: precision strikes, adaptive tactics, and the unparalleled tenacity of human pilots trained under Alara's own rigorous methods. She personally oversaw the accelerated training programs, transforming recruits into warriors capable of matching the Dominion's ferocity. The simulation rooms echoed with the sounds of rapid-fire laser bursts and emergency alarms as cadets pushed their limits under the watchful eye of their mentor. Alara's presence was both inspiring and exacting. She demanded perfection not out of cruelty, but because she understood that every skill learned could mean the difference between life and death in the void of space. Beyond the military halls, Alara was called to the councils of diplomacy, negotiating alliances with wary star systems who had long feared Dominion retaliation. Her reputation preceded her, and many were eager to join the cause, galvanized by the audacity of a human captain who had defied a warlord's legacy. Yet trust was a delicate currency, and Alara navigated these political waters with the same precision she applied to combat. She knew that unity was essential but fragile, and the coalition's strength depended on more than firepower. It depended on belief, on shared purpose. Even in moments of quiet, the weight of command pressed heavily upon her. At night, in the solitude of her quarters, Alara would gaze out at the stars, distant suns casting cold light across the endless void, and wrestle with the enormity of the path ahead. General Thrax's voice haunted the comm channels, a specter of relentless vengeance. The Dominion would regroup, their wrath ignited by the sting of defeat, and Alara knew that the battles to come would test every ounce of her courage and cunning. Yet beneath the weight of responsibility burned an unquenchable fire, the fire of a human spirit that refused to yield, that thrived on challenge and adversity. Each victory, each strategic gain, was a step toward a future where humanity was no longer the hunted but the hunters, where the ghosts of past defeats were transformed into the blazing flames of revolution. As the coalition fleets mobilized for their next assault, Alara stood once more on the bridge of the Phantom's vengeance, the stars swirling in the view screen like a canvas awaiting the brushstrokes of destiny. The galaxy was vast, the war far from over, but she was ready to burn brighter, fight harder, and lead her people into the dawn of a new era. Captain Ghostfire was no longer just a name whispered in the shadows. She was a beacon, a blazing light that would ignite the galaxy. Chapter 3: The Crucible of Fire. The galaxy beyond the shimmering expanse of Zephyr Prime was a vast and merciless crucible, where only the fiercest, most adaptable warriors could hope to survive, and Alara Voss was rapidly carving her name among their legends. The victory she had won was not merely tactical. It was a seismic shift in the balance of power that sent ripples of shock throughout Dominion Command. Yet with every shattered front and every fractured fleet, the Dominion's response grew more ruthless, more unrelenting. General Thrax, his pride wounded but spirit unbroken, marshaled his forces with an iron fist, preparing for a counterstrike that would test every ounce of Alara's resolve. Aboard the Coalition flagship Aegis Resolute, the atmosphere was taut with anticipation as fleets across multiple systems prepared to engage in a coordinated campaign to cripple Dominion supply routes and reclaim contested space. Alara found herself at the center of this storm, a commander burdened with the weight of strategy and the lives of thousands under her command. Every decision she made resonated across the vast network of ships and planets, a ripple that could either ignite victory or unleash catastrophic defeat. The command bridge hummed with a symphony of activity. Officers spoke in clipped tones. Holographic star maps projected enemy movements and logistical data with relentless precision. Alara's eyes scanned the tactical overlays, her mind weaving through layers of variables and possibilities. Unlike the heat of direct combat, this was a war of patience and calculation. She was no longer a lone predator stalking through ruined cityscapes. She was the heart of a sprawling armada poised to strike the Dominion's lifeblood. Her voice, steady and commanding, cut through the din. All units, prepare for orbital insertion. We move on the supply convoy at Grid 674. Priority target, the Dominion's logistical core. Disrupt their fuel lines and sever their reinforcements. This will starve their war machine. The orders were met with nods and swift confirmations. Alara knew that supply lines were the arteries of any war, and cutting them would force Thrax's forces into desperation. As the fleets aligned and accelerated toward their targets, Alara allowed herself a moment of reflection. The war had changed her, once a driven but hopeful pilot. She had become a hardened commander whose every thought was sharpened by sacrifice and necessity. The faces of those she had lost, the friends who had fought beside her, haunted the edges of her mind, fueling her determination to see this through. The galaxy was a cold place, and its wars colder still, but Alara's fire burned fiercely, an ember of humanity's unyielding spirit. The battle that erupted over the desolate moons orbiting Zephyr Prime was cataclysmic. Fleets clashed in dazzling displays of light and power, energy beams arcing across the void, missiles streaking like falling stars against the black canvas of space. The Phantom's vengeance weaved expertly through the chaos, Alara's reflexes and tactical genius turning every threat into an opportunity. She coordinated her squadrons with unerring precision, her commands a seamless dance of offense and defense. General Thrax's forces fought with brutal efficiency, unleashing biomechanical war beasts and dreadnought cruisers that tore through the Coalition's ranks. Yet for every Dominion strike, Alara had a countermeasure, a calculated gambit that kept her forces one step ahead. The battle stretched on, a relentless tempest where the line between victory and annihilation blurred. It was a crucible that tested every skill she possessed, every lesson learned in the long war. In the heart of the storm, Alara felt an overwhelming surge of clarity. The war was no longer a distant conflict. It was a living, breathing tempest that demanded everything she was and more. She was not just fighting for territory or strategy, she was fighting for the soul of humanity, for a future where her people could stand proud among the stars. And as the first blows of this brutal campaign landed with devastating effect, one truth became clear. Captain Ghostfire was no longer merely a challenger to an alien general's legacy. She was the flame that would either consume the Dominion or be consumed by it. The void of space around Zephyr Prime's shattered moons became a turbulent sea of destruction, where the clash of steel and energy roared louder than the cold silence that had ruled for centuries. Captain Alara Voss, aboard the Phantom's vengeance, was the eye of the storm, a beacon of precision amid chaos. Every maneuver, every command she issued, rippled through the vast Coalition fleet like a pulse of unyielding will. Her ship, sliced through the darkness, engines flaring as she evaded torrents of plasma fire and retaliated with deadly efficiency, her weapon systems orchestrating devastation on enemy cruisers that once seemed invincible. The holographic displays around her flickered with real-time analysis, shield levels dropping, critical systems failing, enemy formations fracturing. But the battle was far from over, and the price for even this partial victory was written in the lives of those who fought alongside her. General Thrax's forces, though battered, were relentless. The Dominion's biomechanical war beasts advanced with terrifying tenacity, their armored limbs pounding the void as dreadnought-class ships unleashed barrages of energy that threatened to overwhelm the Coalition's defenses. Thrax himself was a looming specter on the comm channels, his voice a storm of rage and strategy, rallying his commanders with iron resolve. Every strike he ordered was precise, born of decades of brutal command experience. Yet against Alera's unpredictable tactics, even his veteran forces faltered, caught off guard by the cunning and adaptability of the human captain. Her signature maneuvers, learned from years of fighting at the edge of extinction, turned the tide from mere survival to calculated dominance. Throughout the endless hours of battle, Alera's mind remained razor-sharp despite the exhaustion clawing at her spirit. The neural interface in her suit hummed softly, feeding her vital statistics and tactical updates, but it was her instinct honed by countless battles that truly guided her. She anticipated enemy moves before they materialized, weaving through missile barrages and energy blasts with fluid grace. She coordinated daring flanking attacks, diverting heavy fire away from vulnerable ships, and launching surgical strikes on Dominion supply vessels that would cripple their capacity to wage war. Each success was a blow against the legend of invincibility that had surrounded General Thrax for 20 years. Yet beneath the exhilaration of victory lurked a sobering truth. War was a crucible that demanded sacrifice, and not all would survive. Reports of losses trickled in through the comms. Wingmen struck down in fierce dogfights, support ships overwhelmed by superior numbers, entire squads lost to the unforgiving expanse. Alera's heart clenched at each name and number, the cost of every maneuver etched into her soul. But surrender was not an option. For every fallen soldier, she fought harder, her fire burning brighter in defiance of despair. As the Dominion's forces finally began a calculated withdrawal, their supply lines severed and morale shaken, Alera allowed herself a fleeting moment of reflection. The campaign had only just begun, but the damage inflicted was significant, a chink in the Dominion's armor that might one day shatter their grip entirely. The galaxy was watching, and whispers of the human captain who had shattered a decades-old combat record spread like wildfire through the stars. But Alera knew the road ahead was perilous. Thrax's vengeance would be swift and merciless, and the next encounter could very well be the last. In the quiet moments that followed, as the Phantom's vengeance regrouped with the battered fleet, Alera gazed out into the infinite darkness beyond the viewport. The stars twinkled cold and distant, indifferent to the struggles of mortals below. Yet within her burned a flame that no darkness could extinguish, a fierce promise to herself and to all who depended on her. The war was far from over, but she was ready to face whatever fires awaited. For Captain Ghostfire was not just a name. She was a force destined to ignite a new dawn for humanity. Chapter 4. The Fire That Forged a Legend. The battlefield had shifted once more, but the war that had raged for decades was now on the cusp of a decisive turning point. Captain Alera Voss, known throughout the Coalition as Ghostfire, found herself at the heart of a conflict that transcended mere strategy or firepower. It was a struggle for the very soul of the galaxy. The victory she had carved from the ashes of Zephyr Prime had ignited hope among countless worlds, but it had also summoned the wrath of an empire that would stop at nothing to crush that flame. Now, beneath the cold gaze of distant stars and the relentless void, Alera prepared for the ultimate crucible, a battle that would test her resolve, her courage, and her unyielding spirit like never before. The Phantom's vengeance soared through the void, a sleek silhouette against the swirling nebulae that framed the Coalition's staging grounds. Every system aboard the ship was at peak readiness, shields humming with latent power, engines thrumming with restrained fury, weapon arrays calibrated to perfection. Alera stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the holographic displays that mapped the Dominion's massive flagship, the Eclipse Sovereign, a dreadnought of terrifying scale and firepower, commanded personally by General Thrax himself. This was the beast that had ruled the stars for 20 years, the general whose name had struck fear into the hearts of millions. Tonight, their fates would be irrevocably entwined. The Council of War had been unanimous. This confrontation would decide the course of the war. For the Coalition, victory meant liberation. For the Dominion, survival. The tension on the bridge was palpable, officers exchanging grim looks, hands steady on controls, but hearts pounding with the weight of the moment. Alera's voice, calm but steel-edged, cut through the charged silence. This is more than a battle. It is the forge that will temper our future. We strike hard, we strike fast, and we strike together. There is no room for hesitation. The galaxy is watching. As the Phantom's vengeance led the assault fleet into position, the void erupted in a cataclysm of light and sound. The Dominion's defenses flared to life, vast arrays of plasma turrets and missile batteries awakening in deadly chorus. The Eclipse Sovereign loomed like a colossus, its hull scarred by centuries of war, its surface bristling with weapons capable of annihilating entire fleets. But Alera's strategy was unorthodox, born from lessons hard-learned in countless battles. To strike at the heart before the body could respond, to weave through the storm with agility and precision rather than brute force. The Phantom's vengeance surged forward, cloaking systems engaged to cloak it in near invisibility. Alera's hands moved with unerring grace, guiding the ship through a labyrinth of enemy fire and debris. Around her, the fleet followed in a carefully choreographed ballet of destruction, disrupting enemy formations, severing communications, and striking crippling blows to shield generators. The battle raged with ferocious intensity. Explosions blossomed across the battlefield like deadly fireworks. Energy beams carved jagged scars in the darkness, and the roar of engines filled the void with a symphony of war. Then came the moment that would be etched into the chronicles of history, the face-to-face confrontation between Alera and General Thrax. Their ships locked in a deadly dance, exchanging volleys and maneuvers that pushed the limits of technology and skill. Thrax's voice crackled over the comm, a low growl of respect mixed with fury. "Ghostfire, you dare challenge the throne of the Dominion?" Alera's response was steady, unyielding. "I'm here to burn down the myths of your reign. Today, your legacy ends." In that crucible of fire and fury, Captain Alera Voss shattered every expectation. With a combination of daring tactics, unmatched reflexes, and unbreakable spirit, she outmaneuvered the legendary general, exploiting weaknesses no one else had dared to touch. The battle was fierce and unrelenting, but when the final salvo struck, it was Alera's name that echoed through the void as the victor. She had broken the 20-year-old combat record, not merely by minutes or seconds, but by redefining the very meaning of courage and resilience. As the dust settled and the Dominion's forces retreated in disarray, the galaxy knew a new legend had been born. Captain Ghostfire, the human who laughed in the face of despair and burned brighter than any star, had forged a future where freedom was no longer a dream, but an unstoppable reality. The clash between the Phantom's vengeance and the Eclipse Sovereign was unlike any engagement the galaxy had witnessed in generations. General Thrax, a towering figure in both stature and reputation, commanded his dreadnought with ruthless precision, unleashing torrents of plasma and cascading missile salvos designed to obliterate any challenger. Yet Alera Voss, the human captain known as Ghostfire, navigated the chaos with a fierce grace born of relentless determination and profound tactical genius. Every twist, every dive, every calculated burst of firepower was a stroke in the masterpiece she composed amid the stars, a masterpiece of survival, defiance, and raw human spirit. The battle raged on for what felt like an eternity, a deadly dance where the line between life and oblivion blurred into a whirlwind of light and shadow. Alera's neural interface pulsed with data, her senses sharpened to a razor's edge. She anticipated Thrax's moves, countering his most devastating attacks with a mixture of technology and sheer willpower. The Dominion general, who had ruled the void for 2 decades, found himself outmatched not merely by machines or tactics, but by the fiery resilience of a single human captain who refused to be broken. At a critical moment, as the Eclipse Sovereign prepared a devastating final assault, Alara seized her chance. Exploiting a fleeting vulnerability in the Dreadnought's shield matrix, she launched a precision strike, a concentrated barrage of plasma torpedoes that tore through the armor, igniting cataclysmic explosions across the vessel's core. The Eclipse Sovereign shuddered violently, systems failing, weapons going dark. Over the comm channel, Thrax's voice cracked, laced with both rage and reluctant admiration. "You are more than a ghost, Captain. You are a flame that cannot be extinguished." With the Dominion flagship crippled and its forces in disarray, Coalition fleets surged forward, pressing their advantage. Alara's squadron led the charge, their energy blazing across the void as enemy ships fled or were consumed in the relentless storm. The 20-year-old combat record held by General Thrax, the symbol of Dominion invincibility, had been shattered not by overwhelming force, but by courage, ingenuity, and the unbreakable spirit of humanity. As the final signals of battle faded into the cold silence of space, Alara stood on the bridge of the Phantom's vengeance, the weight of victory settling like a mantle across her shoulders. The galaxy was watching, and for the first time in decades, hope was more than a distant dream, it was a blazing reality. The legend of Captain Ghostfire was born not just in the flames of combat, but in the hearts of all who yearned for freedom. In the aftermath, as coalition leaders convened and plans for lasting peace began to take shape, Alara received a message not from a commander or politician, but from the stars themselves. A fleet of distant worlds, once silent in fear, now pledged their allegiance to the cause she had ignited. The war was far from over, but the fire she had kindled promised a dawn where humanity would no longer cower in shadows. Captain Alara Voss, the human who had laughed back at the alien general's scorn and burned brighter than any star, had forged a new legacy. The record was broken, the chains shattered, and the future once dark and uncertain now gleamed with the promise of light. The galaxy had a new legend, and her call sign echoed forever: Ghostfire.